Look at the two of you. Everywhere I go, I find you together.
Nneka, what is it now?
What is it? I should be asking you that. Why are you always following this poor farmer around? Look at him. Dusty clothes, rough hands, a small farm. Is this really the man you have chosen to spend your time with?
Good afternoon, Nneka.
Save your greetings. I am trying to understand what my sister sees in you. I see a good person. A good person. Can a good person buy a palace? Can a good person make someone a queen? Not everything is about money. That is exactly what poor people always say.
Money is not everything.
Maybe not for you because you do not have any. You should stop looking down on people. And you should stop dreaming so small. While you are busy admiring farmers, I am waiting for a prince. A person's character matters more than titles. Not to me. I will marry a rich prince. I will live in a palace. I will wear gold and silk. Servants will run around doing everything for me. And the two of you probably spend your lives counting yams and harvesting cassava together. I would rather be with a good person than a rich person with a bad heart. You can keep your good-hearted farmer. When my prince finally arrives, do not come asking to visit my palace. Sometimes I do not know what to do with her.
One day, she will learn that appearances can be deceiving.
What do you mean?
The village of Achala was one of the most peaceful villages anyone could find. It sat between wide green farms and clusters of tall palm trees that danced gently whenever the wind passed through them. The narrow roads were covered with red dust, and every morning the village woke up to the sound of roosters crowing, goats bleating, women sweeping their compounds, and children laughing as they chased one another around mud houses. Life in Achala was simple. The people farmed, traded in the market, attended festivals, and helped one another whenever there was a problem. Among the many families living in the village was the family of a hard-working farmer named Obi and his wife Ma. They were respected by everyone because they were honest people who never cheated others and never refused to help anyone in need. They had two daughters, Nneka and Adamma. Though both girls were born by the same parents and raised in the same house, they were completely different in character. The villagers often said it was hard to believe they were sisters because they behaved like two people from different worlds. Nneka, the elder sister, was very beautiful. She knew she was beautiful, and that was part of the problem. She loved admiring herself whenever she got the chance. If she walked past a bucket of water and saw her reflection, she would stop and stare. If she passed a polished cooking pot, she would use it as a mirror. She enjoyed hearing people praise her appearance, and she often believed she was more important than everyone around her. In her mind, the best things in life belonged to her. If a woman wore a beautiful wrapper to the market, Nneka would spend the whole day talking about how she deserved a finer one. If a neighbor harvested large yams, she would wonder why she did not have them instead. If someone built a better hut, she would complain that she deserved a bigger house. She always wanted more. Nothing ever seemed enough. Adamma was the complete opposite. She was also beautiful, but she rarely thought about her looks. She cared more about people than appearances. She greeted everyone with respect, from the oldest elder in the village to the smallest child. She smiled often and never looked down on anyone. If she saw an old woman carrying a heavy load of firewood, she would quickly run over and help. If a child fell while playing, she would be the first person to help them stand. Her kindness was so natural that she did not even realize how much people appreciated it. Every morning before sunrise, their mother woke them up. The sky would still be dark and the air would be cool. The smell of burning firewood from nearby kitchens drifted through the village. Their mother would call out, "Girls, wake up. There is work to do." Adamma always rose immediately. She folded her sleeping mat, washed her face, swept the compound, and helped prepare breakfast. Nneka, however, behaved as though waking up was the greatest punishment in the world. Why is morning always coming? Did the sun not shine yesterday? Why does it have to come back again today? Her father would laugh and shake his head. "My daughter, If morning stops coming, how will people farm and eat? Nneka would roll her eyes dramatically. Then let them farm. I was not born to spend my whole life sweating under the sun. Sometimes her father laughed at her comments because they sounded so ridiculous. After breakfast, the family would head to their farm, carrying hoes, baskets, and cutlasses. The farm was a large piece of land filled with yam mounds, cassava plants, maize stalks, and vegetable beds. Birds sang from nearby trees while insects buzzed among the crops. Obi worked tirelessly. Even at his age, he could clear bushes faster than many younger men. Ma worked beside him, planting and weeding with steady determination. Adamma followed their example. She worked hard without complaining. She sang cheerful songs as she weeded around the crops. Sometimes she joked with neighboring farmers, making everyone laugh. Nneka, on the other hand, treated farm work as if it were a personal attack against her happiness. The moment she started working, complaints began pouring from her mouth. The sun is too hot. A few minutes later she would say, the dust is too much. Soon after that she would complain, these insects are trying to eat me alive. Then she would add, look at my hands, they are becoming rough. Her mother would reply patiently, a little hard work never hurt anyone. Nneka would sigh loudly, maybe not, but it is hurting me. One afternoon, while the family worked on the farm, a goat escaped from a nearby compound and wandered into the crops. The animal began chewing leaves as if it had been invited for a feast. Adamma laughed and chased after it. The goat ran between rows of maize, causing several farmers to join the chase. Soon, everyone was laughing and shouting while trying to catch the stubborn animal. Even Obi laughed so hard that he nearly dropped his hoe. Adamma finally grabbed the goat and returned it to its owner. Everyone praised her quickness. Nneka watched the scene and shook her head. Look at all of you running after a goat, she said. One day when I become a queen, I will have servants to chase goats for me. The farmers burst into laughter. One old man wiped tears from his eyes. A queen? He asked. Where will you find a kingdom in Achala? Nneka lifted her chin proudly. A prince will come for me someday. The old man looked around dramatically. Has anyone seen a prince? I have only seen goats, chickens, and donkeys. The farmers laughed even harder. Nneka frowned because she hated being laughed at. She folded her arms and walked away. Despite her attitude, the villagers did not dislike her. Many simply viewed her as a young woman who had not yet learned how life worked. They often hoped she would mature with time. During market days, Adamma and her mother sold vegetables, beans, and cassava. Adamma enjoyed the busy atmosphere. Traders called out to customers, children ran between stalls, women bargained loudly over prices. Drummers sometimes entertained crowds near the center of the market. Adamma greeted everyone warmly and often helped elderly traders arrange their goods. Nneka preferred spending her time admiring expensive fabrics and jewelry. She would stand near traders selling fine items and imagine herself living in luxury. One day, she often told her friends, I will wear the finest clothes in the land. I will live in a palace with servants everywhere. Her friends sometimes laughed because she spoke about it almost every day. And where will you find this palace? One friend asked. Nneka smiled confidently. A prince will find me. Just wait and see. As months passed, nothing changed. Adamma continued spreading kindness wherever she went. Nneka continued dreaming of riches and greatness. One evening, after returning from the farm, the family sat outside eating dinner. Their meal consisted of yam and vegetable stew. The air was cool and the sounds of crickets filled the night. Adamma shared stories about children she had helped during the day. Her parents listened proudly. Then Nneka began describing the luxurious life she planned to live someday. She spoke about golden jewelry, beautiful clothes, huge houses, and servants carrying baskets behind her. Her parents listened quietly before smiling. My daughter, he said gently, there is nothing wrong with dreaming big, but remember that a good heart is worth more than gold. Nneka shrugged. Gold is still very useful. Her mother laughed despite herself. Adamma laughed too. Even Nneka eventually smiled. For a brief moment, the whole family sat together under the moonlight, enjoying one another's company. Their parents looked at both daughters and felt a mixture of pride and concern. They were proud of Adamma's kindness and proud of Nneka's confidence, but they worried about the selfishness growing inside her heart. Later that night, after the girls had gone to sleep, Obi sat outside with his wife. The moon shone brightly above the village. "I worry about Nneka," he admitted softly. Man nodded. "So do I. She thinks too much about wealth and status." "She is still young," Ma replied. "Perhaps she will change." Obi stared at the stars for a long moment. "I hope she learns humility before life teaches it to her the hard way." Inside the house, both sisters slept peacefully, unaware that their lives would soon begin moving toward very different paths. For now, Achala remained calm, the farms remained green, and another ordinary day was coming to an end. The village settled into silence beneath the moonlight, while two sisters, born under the same roof but carrying very different hearts, continued their journey toward a future neither of them could yet see. The days after that peaceful evening continued as they always had in Achala. The sun rose each morning over the green fields, farmers carried their tools to their lands, women swept their compounds before preparing breakfast, and children ran around the village chasing one another with endless energy. Life moved at its usual pace, and nobody knew that a stranger was already walking toward the village, carrying a secret future with him. It was during one of the busiest market seasons of the year. Traders from nearby villages filled the roads carrying baskets of vegetables, yams, fruits, smoked fish, and colorful fabrics. The market square was crowded from morning until evening. Everywhere, people were buying, selling, laughing, and arguing over prices. On one bright morning, as the market buzzed with activity, a young man entered Achala. He carried only a small bag over his shoulder, a farming hoe in one hand, and a calm smile on his face. His clothes were simple and clean. Dust covered his sandals from many days of walking. He looked around the village quietly, taking in the sight of the houses, farms, trees, and people moving about their daily activities. His name was Nzube. Nobody knew where he had come from. Nobody knew his story. To the villagers, he was simply another traveler looking for a place to settle. An elderly man sitting beneath a tree called out to him, "Young man, are you lost?" Nzube smiled respectfully. "No, sir. I am looking for a place to stay." "Do you have family here?" the old man asked. "No, sir." "Friends?" "No, sir." The old man studied him for a moment. "Then why come to Achala?" Nzube looked around at the peaceful surroundings. "Because it feels like a good place." The old man laughed softly. "That is as good a reason as any." By afternoon, Nzube found an old hut near the edge of the village. The hut had been empty for many years after its owner moved away. The roof needed repairs. Part of the walls had cracks. Weeds had almost swallowed the compound. Most people would have looked at the place and walked away. Nzube simply rolled up his sleeves and got to work. He cleared bushes, repaired broken sections, patched holes, and cleaned the entire compound before sunset. Villagers passing by stopped to watch him. "This young man works hard," one woman commented. "Very hard," another agreed. "Look at him. He has not rested since morning." Within a few days, the abandoned compound looked almost new. Nzube then rented a piece of farmland and immediately began preparing it for planting. Every morning before sunrise, he was already awake. By the time other farmers arrived at their fields, he had already completed hours of work. He cleared bushes, dug ridges, repaired fences, and carried heavy loads without complaining. Some men twice his size became tired before he did. One afternoon, a group of farmers watched him carry a bundle of firewood so large that it almost looked bigger than him. One farmer shook his head in amazement. "Does that young man ever get tired?" Another replied, "I think he secretly eats iron instead of food." The farmers burst into laughter. Even the village gossipers struggled to find anything negative to say about him. They always tried, but every time they looked for faults, they found only hard work and good behavior. "Maybe he talks too little," one gossiping woman suggested. "That is not a fault," another replied. "Then maybe he works too much." "That is not a fault either." "Then maybe he smiles too much." Who complains about smiling? Soon even they gave up. Meanwhile, life continued for Nneka and Adamma. Every morning they still accompanied their parents to the farm. Every market day they still helped sell produce. Adamma continued treating everyone with kindness. Nneka continued dreaming about luxury. One afternoon, the sisters went to the stream to fetch water. The stream was one of the busiest places in Achala. Women gathered there daily to wash clothes, fetch water, exchange news, and share stories. Children played nearby while birds sang from the trees. On that particular afternoon, the sun shone brightly overhead. Adamma filled her clay pot and waited several women along the way. Nneka spent more time admiring her reflection in the water than actually fetching water. Be careful, Adamma warned playfully. If you stare at yourself any longer, you might fall into the stream. Nneka rolled her eyes. You are only jealous because I am prettier. Adamma laughed. You say that every day. Because it is true, if you say so. After filling their pots, they began walking back toward the village. At that exact moment, Nzube happened to be returning from his farm. Sweat covered his forehead from hours of work under the hot sun. His clothes were dusty, his hands were rough from labor. Yet, despite his tired appearance, there was something calm and confident about him. As he walked down the path, he noticed Nneka. For a moment, he stopped. The afternoon sunlight shone on her face. She walked with confidence, balancing her pot perfectly. Nzube found himself staring. He quickly looked away, then looked again. His heart beat a little faster. He had seen many beautiful women before, but something about Nneka caught his attention immediately. He hesitated. Then he gathered his courage and stepped forward. Good afternoon, he said politely. Adamma immediately greeted him back. Good afternoon. Nneka barely looked at him. Nzube cleared his throat. My name is Nzube. I recently arrived in Achala. Adamma nodded kindly. Welcome to the village. Thank you, he replied. Then his eyes drifted back toward Nneka. And what is your name? Nneka slowly turned toward him. She looked him up and down from head to toe. Her eyes traveled over his dusty clothes, rough hands, worn sandals, and simple appearance. The look on her face changed instantly. It was the same expression someone might wear after finding a lizard inside their food. Why do you want to know? She asked. Nzube was surprised by her tone but remained polite. I only wanted to introduce myself. Nneka laughed. Not a friendly laugh, a mocking laugh. The kind of laugh that made nearby people turn their heads. Introduce yourself, she repeated. To me? Nzube blinked. Yes. Nneka laughed even louder. Several women carrying water slowed down to listen. Look at this farmer, she said. You introduce yourself as if we are equals. Nzube felt embarrassed but kept his composure. I meant no disrespect. Of course you did not, because you would need courage to disrespect me. A few women exchanged uncomfortable glances. Adamma immediately sensed trouble. Nneka, Adamma warned softly. What? Nneka replied. Am I lying? She turned back to Nzube. Look at yourself. Your clothes are covered in dust. Your hands look like they have fought every tree in the forest. Your feet are rough, and you think you can stand here asking for my name? Nzube felt the sting of her words. Still, he remained calm. I only wished to be friendly. Friendly? Nneka laughed again. You should be friendly with other farmers, not with me. Nearby traders selling roasted corn struggled not to laugh at the dramatic way she spoke. One woman nearly dropped her corn while trying to hide her amusement. Adamma's face burned with embarrassment. Nneka, please stop. But Nneka was only beginning. Listen carefully, she continued. I am not interested in poor farmers. If you ever wish to speak to me again, return as a prince with a palace, servants, horses, and gold. Until then, stay very far away from me. The silence that followed felt heavy. Even the birds seemed quieter. Nzube stood there for a moment. He felt embarrassed, disappointed, and slightly hurt. Yet, he refused to argue. He simply nodded. Very well, he said quietly. Have a good day. Then he turned and walked away. Several villagers watched him leave. Some shook their heads sadly. Others looked at Nneka with disbelief. Adamma felt terrible. She wanted to run after Nzube immediately and apologize, but she knew doing so in front of everyone might embarrass him further. The sisters continued home. The entire way, Nneka looked pleased with herself. Did you see his face? She asked. Adamma frowned. You are cruel. I was honest. There is a difference. No, there is not. There is, Adamma insisted. He greeted you respectfully. And I responded respectfully. Adamma stopped walking. That was respectful? Very. You practically chased him away. Good. Maybe now he knows his place. Adamma stared at her sister in disbelief. What is wrong with being a farmer? Father is a farmer. Father is different. How? Because he is our father. Adamma sighed deeply. There were moments when talking to Nneka felt like talking to a wall. By evening, news of the incident had spread through the village. Achala was not a large place. News traveled faster than fire. By the time the family gathered for dinner, even their parents had heard what happened. Obi looked disappointed. Nneka, he said carefully, is it true you insulted the new farmer? Nneka shrugged while eating. I simply told him the truth. What truth? Her mother asked. That I have no interest in poor men. Obi shook his head. A person's worth is not measured by money. Easy for poor people to say, Nneka replied. The moment the words left her mouth, silence filled the room. Even Nneka seemed to realize she had gone too far. Her father's face fell. Adamma looked shocked. Her mother stared at her in disbelief. After a long moment, Obi spoke softly. We may not be rich, but we have dignity. Nneka lowered her eyes slightly. For a second, she seemed ashamed. Then her pride returned. I did not mean it that way. Adamma finally spoke. You owe that man an apology. Nneka laughed. For what? For treating him badly. You care a lot about this farmer. Because he did nothing wrong. Nneka smirked. Perhaps you secretly like him. Adamma eyed eyes. This is not about liking anyone. Then why defend him? Because kindness matters. Well, if kindness matters so much, maybe you should marry him. The room became silent again. Nneka folded her arms triumphantly. In fact, she continued, I can marry you to him. I will wait for my prince. Adamma shook her head slowly. She knew there was no point arguing further. One day, she said quietly, I hope you learn that people are more important than titles. Nneka smiled confidently. And I hope one day my prince arrives. Adamma simply stood up and walked away. Outside, the night air felt cool against her skin. She stared up at the stars and felt sadness in her heart, not because of what Nneka had said about her, but because of how carelessly her sister treated other people. Inside the house, Nneka remained convinced she had done nothing wrong. She continued dreaming about imaginary palaces, golden crowns, luxurious rooms, and handsome princes. She imagined servants following her everywhere and people bowing whenever she entered a room. Meanwhile, somewhere near the edge of the village, Nzube sat quietly outside his small hut beneath the same stars. Though hurt by the day's events, he refused to let bitterness enter his heart. He simply smiled to himself, looked toward the peaceful village, and prepared for another day of honest work ahead. The morning after that uncomfortable evening was quiet in the household of Obi and Amma. The sun rose slowly over Achala, spreading golden light across the farms and rooftops. Roosters crowed from different compounds, women swept their yards, and smoke rose from outdoor kitchens where breakfast was being prepared. Yet, Adamma could not stop thinking about the young farmer. Every time she remembered the look on Zube's face when Nneka insulted him, she felt ashamed. The poor man had done nothing wrong. He had greeted them politely, and instead of receiving kindness, he had been humiliated before strangers. Adamma tried to focus on her chores, but the memory stayed in her mind. Even while helping her mother peel yams for breakfast, she remained distracted. Her mother noticed immediately. "What is troubling you?" Amma asked. Adamma sighed softly. "I keep thinking about the farmer." Her mother nodded because she already understood. "You have a good heart. That is why you feel bad." Adamma lowered her eyes. "I want to apologize properly. Then do it, her mother replied. A sincere apology never hurts anyone. Later that morning, after completing her chores, Adamma decided to visit Nzube's hut. She carried no special gift. She simply wanted to speak to him face to face. The path leading to the edge of the village was lined with tall grass and small trees. Birds hopped between branches while butterflies floated lazily through the air. As she approached the compound, she became nervous. What if he was angry? What if he refused to speak to her? What if her sister's words had hurt him more deeply than anyone realized? She slowed her steps and took a deep breath before entering the compound. To her surprise, she found Nzube sitting outside beneath a tree. He was repairing a broken basket while quietly humming a cheerful tune. The sunlight filtered through the leaves above him. His expression looked peaceful. There was no sign of bitterness or anger. He seemed completely content. For a moment, Adamma simply stood there watching him. It amazed her how calm he looked after everything that had happened. Eventually, Nzube noticed her. He immediately stopped working and stood up politely. "Good morning," he said with a warm smile. Adamma smiled nervously. "Good morning. Please come and sit." He brought a small wooden stool and placed it beneath the tree. Adamma sat down while twisting her fingers nervously. Nzube noticed her discomfort. "Is everything all right?" he asked. Adamma looked down for a moment before speaking. "I came because I wanted to apologize." Nzube already understood. "For your sister?" Adamma nodded. "Yes." She felt embarrassed all over again. "What she did was wrong. I know her words must have hurt you. I wanted you to know that not everyone in Achala thinks that way." Nzube listened quietly. Then he smiled. "Thank you." Adamma stared. "That is all?" He laughed softly. "What else should I say? You are not angry?" "No, not even a little." Nzube shook his head. "Anger is heavy. Why should I carry it around?" Adamma stared at him. Most people would have been upset. Some would have complained for weeks. Yet this man simply smiled as if nothing. The morning after that uncomfortable evening was quiet in the household of Obi and Amma. The sun rose slowly over Achala, spreading golden light across the farms and rooftops. Roosters crawled from different compounds, women swept their yards, and smoke rose from outdoor kitchens where breakfast was being prepared. Yet, Adamma could not stop thinking about the young farmer. Every time she remembered the look on Zube's face when Nneka insulted him, she felt ashamed. The poor man had done nothing wrong. He had greeted them politely, and instead of receiving kindness, he had been humiliated before strangers. Adamma tried to focus on her chores, but the memory stayed in her mind. Even while helping her mother peel yams for breakfast, she remained distracted. Her mother noticed immediately. "What is troubling you?" Amma asked. Adamma sighed softly. "I keep thinking about the farmer." Her mother nodded because she already understood. "You have a good heart. That is why you feel bad." Adamma lowered her eyes. "I want to apologize properly." "Then do it," her mother replied. A sincere apology never hurts anyone. Later that morning, after completing her chores, Adamma decided to visit Nzube's hut. She carried no special gift. She simply wanted to speak to him face to face. The path leading to the edge of the village was lined with tall grass and small trees. Birds hopped between branches while butterflies floated lazily through the air. As she approached the compound, she became nervous. What if he was angry? What if he refused to speak to her? What if her sister's words had hurt him more deeply than anyone realized? She slowed her steps and took a deep breath before entering the compound. To her surprise, she found Nzube sitting outside beneath a tree. He was repairing a broken basket while quietly humming a cheerful tune. The sunlight filtered through the leaves above him. His expression looked peaceful. There was no sign of bitterness or anger. He seemed completely content. For a moment, Adamma simply stood there watching him. It amazed her how calm he looked after everything that had happened. Eventually, Nzube noticed her. He immediately stopped working and stood up politely. "Good morning," he said with a warm smile. Adamma smiled nervously. "Good morning. Please come and sit." He brought a small wooden stool and placed it beneath the tree. Adamma sat down while twisting her fingers nervously. Nzube noticed her discomfort. "Is everything all right?" he asked. Adamma looked down for a moment before speaking. "I came because I wanted to apologize." Nzube already understood. "For your sister?" Adamma nodded. Yes. She felt embarrassed all over again. What she did was wrong. "I know her words must have hurt you. I wanted you to know that not everyone in Achala thinks that way." Nzube listened quietly. Then he smiled. "Thank you." Adamma stared. "That is all?" He laughed softly. "What else should I say?" "You are not angry?" "No, not even a little." Nzube shook his head. "Anger is heavy. Why should I carry it around?" Adamma stared at him. Most people would have been upset. Some would have complained for weeks. Yet this man simply smiled as if nothing had happened. "You are very different," she said honestly. "Different how?" "Most people would not have reacted that way." Nzube chuckled. "Life is too short to spend it being angry." Adamma found herself smiling. The conversation became easier after that. They talked about the village, farming, the weather, and many small things. Before she realized it, almost an hour had passed. When she finally stood up to leave, she felt strangely comfortable around him. "Thank you for listening," she said. "Thank you for visiting," he replied. As she walked home, she felt lighter than she had in days. The apology had gone far better than she expected. A few days later, Adamma found herself thinking about Nzube again, not because she felt sorry for him anymore, but because she genuinely enjoyed talking to him. He was easy to be around. He listened when people spoke. He never boasted. He never tried to impress anyone. Whenever he smiled, it felt sincere. One afternoon, while helping her mother prepare lunch, she noticed there was more food than the family could finish. A thought crossed her mind. "Mother," she said, "can I take some food to the farmer?" Emma smiled knowingly. "Of course." Soon, Adamma packed a portion of pounded yam and soup into a covered container and carried it towards Nzube's farm. The farm was located beyond the village near a cluster of trees. When she arrived, she found him working under the hot sun. Sweat covered his forehead, but he continued digging without complaint. When he noticed her approaching, his face brightened immediately. "Adamma," he called, "what brings you here?" She lifted the container. "Food." Nzube laughed. "For me? Unless there's another hungry farmer hiding in these bushes." He laughed harder. "Thank you." They sat beneath a nearby tree and shared the meal. Nzube ate gratefully while Adamma watched. "This is delicious," he said after taking a bite. "My mother cooked most of it." "Then tell her she has magical hands." Adamma laughed. "Magical?" "Yes, this food almost made me forget how tired I am." From that day forward, visits like that became common. Whenever Adamma prepared food or helped her mother cook, she often carried a portion to Nzube's farm or hut. Sometimes she brought steaming pounded yam with rich soup. Other times she carried beans porridge cooked with palm oil and fish. On some days, she brought fried plantains, roasted fish, rice or yam porridge. Nzube always accepted the meals with gratitude. He never acted entitled. He always appreciated every gesture. In return, he often shared produce from his farm. One morning, he arrived at her family's compound carrying a basket overflowing with fruits. "What is all this?" Adamma asked. "A small thank you." The basket contained ripe oranges, bananas, mangoes, coconuts, and fresh vegetables. The oranges smelled sweet. The mangoes were so ripe they almost glowed. "This is too much," Adamma protested. "Not compared to all the food you have brought me." Their friendship continued growing naturally. They spent many afternoons talking beneath mango trees while villagers walked past, carrying firewood, baskets, and water pots. Sometimes they discussed farming. Other times they shared funny childhood stories. One afternoon, Nzube told a story about accidentally falling into a muddy ditch while chasing a chicken as a child. Adamma laughed so hard that tears rolled down her cheeks. "You are lying," she said between laughs. "I am not. No child can be that foolish." "Then you have clearly never met me as a child." Their laughter attracted the attention of several passing villagers who smiled at the sight. As weeks passed, the villagers began noticing how often they spent time together. Some quietly wondered if friendship might eventually become something more. Others simply enjoyed seeing two good people getting along. During community farming days, entire groups of villagers worked together on shared projects. These events were always lively. People sang songs while planting crops, others told jokes. Children ran around creating trouble wherever they went. During one such farming day, Adamma and Nzube worked side by side planting maize. The work was hard, but the atmosphere remained cheerful. At one point, an elderly farmer began singing loudly despite having a terrible singing voice. The sound was so bad that several birds flew from nearby trees. "Even the birds are running away," Nzube joked. The elderly farmer laughed. "They are leaving because they are jealous of my talent." The entire field erupted with laughter. Later that same day, something happened that became one of the funniest stories in Achala. During lunch break, Nzube placed his food beneath a tree while he fetched water. Unfortunately, a stubborn village goat noticed the meal. By the time Nzube returned, the animal was already eating it. "Hey!" Nzube shouted. The goat looked at him briefly, grabbed a larger piece and ran. Nzube immediately chased after it. The goat ran across the field with surprising speed. Farmers stopped working to watch the spectacle. "Catch him!" someone shouted. "The goat is winning!" another person yelled. The chase continued through rows of crops. Every time Nzube got close, the goat changed direction. At one point, the animal even appeared to look back proudly before running faster. Adamma laughed so hard that she nearly dropped her water pot. Tears streamed down her face. She could barely breathe. "Stop running!" she shouted between fits of laughter. "I am trying!" Nzube yelled while chasing the goat. The entire field became a scene of chaos and amusement. Even older villagers who rarely laughed were wiping tears from their eyes. Eventually, the goat escaped with part of the meal. Nzube turned exhausted and defeated, while everyone continued laughing. For weeks afterward, villagers teased him whenever they saw a goat. "Hide your food," they would shout. "The champion is coming!" Meanwhile, Nneka watched the growing friendship with endless amusement. Whenever she saw Adamma and Nzube together, she found new ways to mock them. One afternoon, she saw them carrying baskets of vegetables. "Look at them," she announced loudly to her friends. "The future king and queen of poverty." Her friends giggled. Another day, she saw Nzube delivering fruits to Adamma's family. "Wonderful," she said dramatically. "Now they can afford half a mango." Sometimes she exaggerated so much that even her friends struggled to keep straight faces. One day, she declared, they will own exactly half a goat and one cooking pot between them. The statement was so ridiculous that nearby villagers burst into laughter, not because they agreed with her, but because the exaggeration sounded absurd. An elderly woman shook her head. "That girl talks too much." Nneka ignored the criticism. She remained convinced that she was destined for luxury, while Adamma and Nzube were destined for ordinary lives. Yet, despite the mockery, neither Adamma nor Nzube allowed her words to affect them. Whenever Nneka insulted them, they simply continued their conversation or returned to their work. Their friendship had become stronger than village gossip. It was built on mutual respect, trust, and genuine affection. Neither realized exactly how important the other was becoming. They simply enjoyed spending time together. The days passed peacefully. Meals were shared, stories were exchanged, laughter filled many afternoons beneath mango trees. The villagers gradually grew accustomed to seeing them together, and although neither spoke of it openly, a quiet bond was forming between them, growing stronger with each passing day, while Nneka continued watching from a distance, convinced that she was witnessing the friendship of two people she believed would never amount to much. As the months passed, Nzube became one of the most familiar faces in Achala. At first, he had arrived as a stranger, carrying only a small bag, a farming hoe, and a quiet smile. But now, it seemed as though he had always been part of the village. The people respected him because he worked harder than most men and never behaved arrogantly. He greeted everyone politely, helped anyone who needed assistance, and never looked down on others. Whenever an elderly person struggled with a heavy load, Nzube would quietly carry it without being asked. If a widow needed help repairing her fence, he would show up with tools before sunrise. If children accidentally damaged a farm boundary while playing, he would help rebuild it without demanding payment. The villagers often wondered where such a hard-working young man had come from. Some believed he had escaped from a difficult life somewhere else. Others believed he simply enjoyed living quietly. Whatever the truth was, nobody could deny that he had earned their respect. Adamma's parents grew especially fond of him. Obi treated him almost like his son, while Ma always made sure he never left their compound hungry. Whenever Nzube hesitated, Ma would insist he sit down and eat something. Sometimes she served him roasted yam with yoba sauce. Other times, she prepared beans, rice, fish stew, or vegetable soup. Nzube always accepted with gratitude. One afternoon, Obi was struggling to repair a section of fencing around his farm. Several wooden poles had broken after a heavy storm. Before he could finish gathering materials, Nzube arrived. Without being asked, he picked up a hammer and joined the work. Together, they spent hours repairing the damage. By sunset, the fence looked stronger than before. Obi wiped sweat from his forehead and smiled. "If I had another son, I would want him to be like you." Nzube laughed softly. "Careful, sir. If you praise me too much, I might start believing I am important." Obi shook his head. "You are important." The words were simple, but they touched Nzube deeply. For a brief moment, something flashed across his face. It was gratitude mixed with sadness. The expression disappeared quickly, but Adamma noticed it. She had begun noticing many small things about Nzube lately. She noticed how he always helped others before helping himself. She noticed how he often stared into the distance when he thought nobody was watching. She noticed how he smiled often, but sometimes carried a sadness hidden deep within his eyes. It made her curious. One evening, after a long day of work, Adamma visited Nzube's hut. The sky was beautiful that evening. The sun was slowly disappearing behind distant trees, painting the clouds with shades of orange, gold, and red. The village seemed peaceful. Smoke drifted upward from cooking fires. Birds flew back toward their nests. Somewhere in the distance, children laughed while chasing one another across a field. Nzube sat outside his hut watching the sunset quietly. Adamma joined him beneath the tree near his compound. For a while, neither spoke. They simply watched the changing colors of the sky. Finally, Adamma broke the silence. "It is beautiful." Nzube nodded. "Very beautiful." A gentle breeze passed between them. After a moment, Adamma looked at him thoughtfully. "Can I ask you something?" Nzube said, "Of course." She hesitated briefly. "Where exactly did you come from?" Nzube's smile faded slightly, not completely, just enough for her to notice. He stared at the horizon for a few seconds before answering. "A village very far from here." "Do you miss it?" He shrugged lightly. "Sometimes." "Do you have family there?" The question hung in the air. For a moment, he seemed unsure whether to answer. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Not nearby." His voice sounded distant. Adamma noticed it immediately. "What happened?" she asked gently. Nzube remained quiet. The breeze stirred the leaves overhead. The sounds of evening continued around them. Finally, he spoke. "Life happened." Adamma frowned slightly. "That is not much of an answer." Nzube chuckled softly. "Perhaps not." She waited patiently. After a long silence, he continued. "Let us just say that sometimes a person leaves a place because staying becomes difficult." Adamma studied his face. There was sadness there. Real sadness. The kind that came from old wounds that never completely healed. She suddenly realized that although she knew many things about Nzube, there was still large parts of his life hidden from everyone. "Do you miss your family?" she asked quietly. Nzube looked away. "Sometimes." "Do they know where you are?" Another pause. "No." Adamma's heart softened. The thought of being far away from family made her feel sad. She could not imagine living alone without knowing when she would see her loved ones again. That must be lonely. Nzube smiled faintly. At times. Adamma looked at him for several seconds before speaking again. Well, as long as you are in Achala, you are not alone. Nzube turned toward her. The sincerity in her voice surprised him. What do you mean? Adamma smiled warmly. You have friends here. Friends? Yes. Who? She laughed. Do not pretend you do not know. Nzube laughed too. All right, maybe I have one friend. One? Adamma placed her hand on her chest dramatically. Only one? Maybe two if I count your father. They both laughed. Then Adamma became serious again. What I mean is, you do not have to carry everything by yourself. You have people who care about you here. For a moment, Nzube could not speak. Nobody had said something like that to him in a long time. He looked at her quietly before saying, "Thank you." It was a simple phrase, but it carried genuine emotion. From that evening onward, something changed between them. Their friendship became even stronger. They spent more time together, not because they planned it, but because they genuinely enjoyed each other's company. When there was a village festival, they attended together. When there was a harvest celebration, they participated together. When there were community gatherings, they often found themselves standing side by side. During one harvest festival, the village square overflowed with excitement. Drummers played energetic rhythms while dancers moved gracefully to the music. Women displayed baskets filled with yams, fruits, vegetables, and other produce. Children ran around wearing bright smiles. The smell of roasted meat drifted through the air. Adamma and Nzube walked through the crowd together. At one point, a group of dancers invited Nzube to join them. "No," he said immediately, "I cannot dance." The dancers laughed. "Everyone can dance. Not me." They pulled him into the center anyway. The result was disastrous. Nzube's movement was so awkward that people began laughing almost immediately. Even Adamma doubled over with laughter. One elderly woman nearly dropped her walking stick from amusement. When the music ended, Nzube bowed dramatically. "Thank you. You have witnessed history." Adamma wiped tears from her eyes. What kind of history? The worst dancing Achala has ever seen. Everyone nearby laughed. During another village event, they attended a wrestling competition. The entire village gathered around a large open field. Young men competed while crowds cheered loudly. Every victory was celebrated as though a king had conquered an empire. Nzube and Adamma sat together watching the matches. One wrestler was particularly confident. Before his match began, he spent several minutes boasting about his strength. "Nobody can defeat me," he declared loudly. "I am stronger than a lion." Moments later, his opponent lifted him off the ground and threw him into the dust. The crowd exploded with laughter. Even Nzube laughed so hard he nearly fell off his seat. "The lion has become a goat," he joked. Adamma laughed until her stomach hurt. Another favorite activity was the moonlight storytelling gatherings. On certain evenings, villagers gathered beneath the stars to tell stories, sing songs, and share wisdom. Children sat in circles, listening eagerly while elders spoke. During one gathering, an old storyteller spent nearly 20 minutes describing a giant fish. By the end of the story, the fish had somehow become larger than a house. "That fish is impossible," Adamma whispered. Nzube grinned. "Wait a little longer. By the end of the story, it might become larger than the village." Sure enough, the fish continued growing with every sentence. Adamma struggled not to laugh. These simple moments brought them closer together. Yet despite their growing friendship, there were certain subjects Nzube always avoided. Whenever conversations moved too close to his past, he changed the topic. Whenever someone asked detailed questions about his former life, his answers became vague. Adamma noticed, but never pushed too hard. She respected his privacy. Still, curiosity remained. Who was Nzube really? Why had he left his home? What was he hiding? Meanwhile, Nneka continued seeing only what was visible on the surface. Every time she looked at Nzube, she saw a poor farmer, nothing more. She never bothered looking deeper. She remained focused on dreams of luxury and status. Many afternoons, she sat with her friends discussing imaginary futures. "My wedding will be the grandest wedding ever seen," she announced one day. "How grand?" one friend asked. Nneka's eyes sparkled. "There will be hundreds of servants." "Hundreds?" one friend asked. "Maybe thousands." Her friends laughed. "Where will you find thousands of servants?" Nneka waved dismissively. "My prince will provide them." Another day, she spent hours describing royal carriages decorated with gold and jewels. On another occasion, she talked about giant palaces with rooms so numerous that people would need maps to avoid getting lost. Her imagination grew bigger every week. Adamma often listened quietly without arguing. There was no point. Nneka remained convinced that wealth alone determined a person's value. What she failed to realize was that the future she desired stood right before her eyes almost every day. She simply could not see it. While she dreamed about princes, she ignored the remarkable man living quietly in Achala. While she searched for wealth, she overlooked character. While she judged appearances, she missed the truth completely. Unknown to everyone in the village, Nzube carried a secret capable of changing many lives. Yet he guarded it carefully. For now, he remained simply a hard-working farmer in the eyes of Achala. And perhaps that was exactly how he wanted it. As the months continued passing, the bond between them grew stronger with every shared meal, every conversation beneath the trees, every festival, every laugh, and every moment of quiet understanding. Neither fully realized how important they had become to one another, but the foundation of something beautiful was steadily being built, hidden beneath the simplicity of ordinary village life. One bright morning, Achala woke up to excitement unlike anything the village had experienced in a very long time. The day began normally. Roosters crowed, women swept their compounds, farmers prepared to head to their fields, traders arranged goods for sale in the market, children chased one another through the dusty roads. Everything seemed ordinary until a young boy came running into the center of the village, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Visitors are coming! Visitors are coming!" The boy was running so fast that he nearly collided with a goat before stumbling into the market square. Several women looked up from their stalls. "What visitors?" one asked. The boy struggled to catch his breath. "Important visitors!" he shouted. "Very important!" Before anyone could ask more questions, another villager came hurrying down the road. Then another. Soon people began gathering near the entrance of the village. Curiosity spread quickly. In Achala, news traveled faster than the wind. Within minutes, half the village was moving toward the main road to see what was happening. Among them were Nneka and her friends. Nneka loved excitement, especially if there was even the smallest chance that wealth or status might be involved. She adjusted her wrapper carefully and hurried forward. "Move aside," she said. "I want to see." The crowd continued growing. Then finally they appeared. A group of men emerged from the dusty road leading into Achala. At the center walked a handsome young stranger. He wore magnificent robes decorated with gold embroidery that glittered in the sunlight. His sandals looked expensive, rings shone on his fingers. His hair was neatly groomed. Behind him walked several guards carrying luggage and acting extremely important. The guards carried themselves with stiff expressions and proud posture. One even held a decorative staff. The entire scene looked impressive. Gasps spread through the crowd. Women whispered excitedly. Men exchanged surprised glances. Children stared with wide eyes. Nneka's mouth slowly fell open. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. It was as if one of her daydreams had suddenly come to life. The stranger looked exactly like the kind of prince she had spent years imagining. One elderly woman nudged another. "Do you see what I am seeing?" The second woman nodded. "Unless we are both dreaming." The stranger smiled confidently as he approached the gathering crowd. He seemed accustomed to attention. He stopped in the center of the village and surveyed the people around him. Then he spoke in a clear voice. "Greetings, people of Achala." The villagers immediately fell silent. "Greetings," several voices replied. The stranger smiled. "My name is Prince Kelechi." The title alone created another wave of excitement. People immediately began whispering among themselves. A prince, an actual prince, not a storyteller's prince, not a legend, not a rumor, a real prince standing right there in their village. Nneka's heart pounded so hard she thought everyone around her could hear it. Prince Kelechi continued speaking. I come from a far-away kingdom. I have traveled through many villages searching for something important. The villagers listened eagerly. I have come in search of a wife. For several seconds, there was complete silence. Then, excitement exploded like a thunderstorm. Women gasped, young ladies exchanged looks, children laughed because they sensed something dramatic was happening. Nneka nearly fainted. She grabbed one of her friends for support. Did you hear that? She whispered. Her friend nodded frantically. I heard it. A prince, a real prince looking for a wife. A wife! Nneka's eyes practically sparkled. For years she had spoken endlessly about marrying a prince. Everyone had laughed. Everyone had rolled their eyes. Everyone had treated her dreams as fantasies. Yet, now a prince had arrived in Achala looking for a bride. It felt like destiny itself had stepped into the village. From that moment forward, Nneka became completely obsessed. The prince had barely finished introducing himself before she began adjusting her appearance. She smoothed her wrapper, fixed her hair, straightened her posture, smiled dramatically. Her friends watched in amusement. Are you already preparing? One asked. Of course I am, Nneka replied. This is my moment. The prince and his guards were given temporary lodging near the center of the village. Throughout the day, villagers visited to greet him. Many brought gifts. Some brought food. Others simply came to admire him. Nneka visited 3 times before sunset. The first visit was simply to introduce herself. The second visit was because she claimed she had forgotten something important. The third visit was because she suddenly remembered something else. By evening, even her friends were laughing. If you visit one more time today, one joked, you might as well move into his compound. Nneka ignored them. The following morning, she woke up before sunrise. This was remarkable because Nneka usually treated mornings as personal enemies. Her mother nearly dropped a spoon when she saw her already awake. Are you sick? Ma asked. Nneka was offended. Why would I be sick? Because you are awake before the chickens. Nneka ignored the comment and hurried through her chores. She carefully selected her best clothes and spent extra time arranging her appearance. Then she rushed toward the prince's residence. She arrived carrying a pot of water. Good morning, she said sweetly. Prince Kelechi smiled. Good morning. Nneka lowered her eyes modestly. I thought you might need water. The prince accepted it graciously. Nneka nearly floated home afterward. Her friends gathered around her immediately. Did he speak to you? One asked. Yes. What did he say? Good morning. Her friend screamed with excitement. The fact that he had simply greeted her seemed completely irrelevant. To them, it felt like progress. Over the following days, Nneka's behavior became more dramatic. Whenever the prince looked thirsty, she appeared with water. Whenever he looked hungry, she appeared with food. Whenever he needed assistance, she somehow appeared nearby. If he smiled, she smiled wider. If he laughed, she laughed harder. Sometimes she laughed at jokes that made absolutely no sense. Once, the prince casually commented that a chicken looked serious. Nneka laughed so hard that she almost fell off her seat. Even the prince looked confused by the intensity of her reaction. Meanwhile, the villagers watched with endless amusement. One afternoon, a group of women sat beneath a tree discussing the situation. Have you noticed Nneka lately? One asked. Everyone has noticed. The girl has changed completely. She works harder now than she has worked in her entire life. Another woman laughed. Yesterday, I saw her carrying 3 buckets of water. The others gasped dramatically. 3? 3! The same Nneka? The very same. An elderly woman shook her head. Love is powerful. Another replied, that is not love, that is ambition. Everyone burst into laughter. Nneka's transformation became the favorite source of entertainment throughout Achala. The same woman who once complained about carrying small baskets now carried heavy loads without complaint. The same woman who avoided difficult chores now volunteered for them. One afternoon, villagers watched in disbelief as she swept an entire compound simply because the prince happened to be visiting nearby. "Is that Nneka?" someone asked. "I think so. Are we sure? Maybe a spirit has entered her body." Another villager laughed. "If another prince arrives, she might start carrying trees on her head." The joke spread throughout the village and became famous within days. Even Adamma laughed when she heard it. Yet, beneath all the comedy, something deeper was happening. Prince Kelechi had begun spending more time with Nneka. He complimented her beauty often. He praised her elegance. He told her she stood out from the other women. Every compliment made her heart soar. Every kind word strengthened her belief that destiny was unfolding exactly as she had imagined. One evening, they sat together beneath a large tree. The prince spoke softly. "You are different from the others." Nneka nearly stopped breathing. "Really?" she asked. "Of course." The prince smiled warmly. "When I look at you, I can easily imagine you inside a palace." Nneka's heart raced. She could already imagine it too. Silk clothing, gold jewelry, beautiful rooms, servants waiting for instructions. Everything she had dreamt about for years. The prince continued, feeding those dreams. Every conversation included promises. He spoke about luxury. He described magnificent palaces. He talked about expensive clothing imported from distant lands. He described grand feasts attended by nobles and royalty. Nneka listened with complete fascination. She absorbed every word. The prince noticed this and continued. "You deserve more than village life." Nneka immediately agreed. "I have always believed that. You deserve luxury. Yes. You deserve servants. Absolutely. You deserve a palace." Nneka smiled so hard her cheeks hurt. The prince's promises became more extravagant with each passing day. He described rooms larger than entire houses, gardens filled with exotic flowers, jewelry so expensive that people would need guards just to protect it. He painted pictures with words, and Nneka eagerly believed every detail. Whenever she returned home, she could not stop talking about him. During meals, she discussed him. During chores, she discussed him. Before sleeping, she discussed him. Her parents grew concerned. Obi listened quietly one evening as Nneka described future palace life in great detail. When she finally paused for breath, he asked gently, "How well do you actually know this man?" Nneka looked annoyed. "He is a prince." "That does not answer my question." "I know enough." Obi frowned slightly. "Sometimes people are not what they appear to be." Nneka immediately dismissed the warning. "You are worrying for nothing." Adamma also felt uneasy. Something about the situation seemed too perfect. She could not explain it, yet every time she tried expressing concern, Nneka became defensive. "You are jealous," Nneka accused one evening. Adamma laughed in disbelief. "Jealous of what? The prince likes me. That is not what worries me. Then what does?" Adamma hesitated. "I just think you should be careful." Nneka rolled her eyes dramatically. "You are worrying too much." Deep inside, Nneka believed her future was finally arriving. Every promise from the prince felt like proof. Every compliment felt like confirmation. Every meeting strengthened her confidence. Completely blinded by ambition, excitement, and dreams of luxury, she accepted everything he told her without question, never imagining that appearances could deceive and never suspecting that the beautiful future being painted before her eyes might not be as real as it seemed. Weeks turned into months, and the excitement that had filled Achala when the supposed prince first arrived did not fade for Nneka. Instead, it grew stronger with every passing day. At first, many villagers thought her excitement would calm down after a few weeks. They believed she would eventually return to her normal life and stop chasing the stranger around the village. They were wrong. Nneka became even more devoted than before. Every morning she awoke before sunrise, long before the roosters announced the beginning of a new day. This was shocking because everyone in Achala knew Nneka usually treated waking up early as if it were a punishment from the heavens. Before the prince arrived, her mother often had to call her several times before she finally left her sleeping mat. Sometimes she complained for 10 minutes before standing up. Yet now, she jumped out of bed before anyone else. One morning, Ma woke up and nearly screamed when she saw Nneka already sweeping the compound. The sky was still dark. Even the chickens looked surprised. "Nneka," Ma asked suspiciously, "are you feeling well?" Nneka stopped sweeping and frowned. "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" Ma folded her arms. "Because you are awake before the sun." Nneka ignored the comment and continued working. After sweeping, she hurried into the kitchen to begin cooking. She carefully prepared meals she hoped would impress the prince. Some mornings, she made pounded yam with rich egusi soup. Other mornings, she prepared rice and stew with pieces of fish and meat. Sometimes, she cooked beans with fried plantains. Sometimes, she prepared goat meat pepper soup. Whenever she heard the prince mention a particular food, she immediately learned how to make it. Her mother watched all this with growing concern. One morning, while helping prepare food, Adamma whispered to their mother, "Do you remember when Nneka said cooking was too much work?" Ma sighed. "I remember." Adamma pointed toward her sister, who was busy stirring a pot with intense concentration. "Look at her now." Ma shook her head slowly. A prince has achieved what years of parenting could not. Despite the humor, both women felt worried. Nneka's entire world seemed to revolve around the prince. After cooking, she would carefully arrange the food inside containers and carry them to his residence. She never arrived empty-handed. If she was not bringing food, she was bringing water. If she was not bringing water, she was bringing fruit. If she was not bringing fruit, she was offering assistance. Every excuse became an opportunity to spend time near him. The prince welcomed all of it. He smiled whenever she arrived. He accepted every gift. He praised her generosity. He complimented her beauty. And Nneka soaked up every word like dry ground absorbing rain. One afternoon, she arrived carrying a large tray filled with food. The meal included roasted fish, rice, vegetable stew, fried plantains, and fresh fruit. The prince looked impressed. "Did you prepare all this?" he asked. Nneka smiled proudly. "Yes. For me? Of course." The prince shook his head in admiration. "You are remarkable." Those 3 words remained in Nneka's mind for the rest of the week. She repeated them to herself whenever she felt sad. She repeated them before sleeping. She repeated them while working. Sometimes she even smiled for no reason, simply because she remembered them. Meanwhile, the prince continued enjoying her attention. His lifestyle became increasingly comfortable. His clothes remained clean because Nneka washed them. His room remained tidy because Nneka cleaned it. His meals appeared on time because Nneka cooked them. Whenever he needed something, Nneka found a way to provide it. Village women began noticing. One afternoon, several women sat beneath a tree peeling vegetables while discussing village news. Eventually, the conversation turned toward Nneka. "Have you noticed how much work she does for that man?" one woman asked. Another laughed. "Does? She practically runs his entire household." An older woman shook her head slowly. "That girl behaves like a wife already." The others nodded. "Exactly. Yet there is no marriage, not even a wedding date, not even preparations." One woman sighed. "I hope she knows what she's doing." Unfortunately, Nneka paid no attention to such conversations. Whenever she overheard criticism, she immediately dismissed it as jealousy. In her mind, people simply envied her good fortune. After all, she believed she was about to marry a prince. Why would she listen to ordinary villagers? Her dreams became larger than reality. While walking to the stream, she imagined herself riding inside royal carriages. While sweeping the compound, she imagined servants doing the work. While carrying water, she imagined living in a palace where others carried water for her. She pictured expensive clothing, golden jewelry, luxurious rooms, and endless comfort. Sometimes her imagination became so vivid that she almost forgot where she was. One afternoon, she accidentally walked into a tree because she was daydreaming about royal weddings. The incident became the source of laughter for several children who witnessed it. "Even trees want to meet the future queen," one boy joked. The children laughed until tears filled their eyes. Nneka ignored them. Her mind remained focused on the future she expected. Adamma, however, grew increasingly uncomfortable. She noticed things that bothered her. The prince made many promises but offered few specifics. Whenever marriage was mentioned, he always found a reason to delay discussing details. One evening, while sitting beneath a tree, Adamma decided to speak honestly with her sister. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Nneka nodded. "What?" "When exactly are you getting married?" Nneka smiled dreamily. "Soon." "How soon?" "Very soon." Adamma frowned. "That is not an answer." Nneka shrugged. "The prince says there are certain matters that must be arranged first." "What matters?" "Royal matters." Adamma sighed. "That is not very specific." Nneka rolled her eyes. "You would not understand." "Try me." Nneka crossed her arms. "You always look for problems." "No, I look for answers." "You are jealous." Adamma stared at her in disbelief. "Again?" "Yes. Why would I be jealous?" "Because a prince chose me." Adamma laughed softly. "This is not about jealousy." "Then what is it about?" Adamma looked at her carefully. "It is about making sure you are not being hurt." For a brief moment, Nneka's expression softened. Then pride returned. "The prince loves me." "I hope so." "He does." "Then why does he avoid discussing marriage?" Nneka immediately became defensive. "Because important arrangements take time." "Months?" "Yes." "Without any preparations?" Nneka stood up abruptly. "You always doubt everything." Adamma remained calm. "I only want you to be careful." "Well, stop worrying. Everything is fine." The conversation ended there. Yet, Adamma remained troubled. The prince's behavior simply did not feel right. Obi and Mindor shared similar concerns. One evening after dinner, they sat outside discussing the situation. The moon hung above the village while insects chirped in the darkness. "I do not trust that man," Obi admitted. Mindor nodded slowly. "Neither do I." "Something feels wrong. Very wrong." Obi sighed deeply. But Nneka refuses to listen. Mindor looked toward the house where their daughter slept. "She is blinded by her dreams." The following day, Obi attempted to speak with Nneka directly. He approached the conversation carefully. "My daughter," he began. "A wise person asks questions before giving away trust." Nneka immediately knew where the discussion was heading. "Father, not this again. Please listen." "I am listening." "Has the prince spoken to elders about marriage?" "Not yet." "Has he met with family representatives?" "Not yet." "Has he set a date?" "Not yet." Obi paused. "Then what exactly has he done?" Nneka hesitated. "He loves me." Obi looked sad. "Love speaks through actions." Nneka felt irritation rising. "You do not understand." "Then help me understand." "I cannot explain royal matters." Obi sighed. The conversation was going nowhere. Nneka had built her entire future around the prince. Any criticism felt like an attack against her dreams. Meanwhile, the prince continued encouraging those dreams. He spoke often about wealth. He described enormous palaces with marble floors and golden decorations. He talked about expensive clothing imported from distant lands. He described royal banquets attended by nobles and kings. Whenever Nneka listened, her eyes sparkled with excitement. The prince understood exactly what she wanted to hear. One afternoon, they sat together beneath a tree while he described palace life. "There are rooms larger than some houses," he said. Nneka gasped. "Really?" "Of course." "How many rooms?" The prince pretended to think. "Too many to count." Nneka smiled dreamily. That sounds wonderful. It is. He leaned closer. And one day it could all be yours. Nneka's heart nearly burst with happiness. Those words echoed inside her mind long after the conversation ended. She could already picture herself living that life. She imagined villagers visiting her palace and staring in amazement. She imagined everyone who had doubted her apologizing. She imagined walking through magnificent halls wearing expensive jewelry while servants followed behind her. The fantasy became stronger than reality. Even when warning signs appeared, she ignored them. Even when questions remained unanswered, she ignored them. Even when her family expressed concern, she ignored them. During this period, Nzube remained mostly silent. He watched events unfold without interfering. He never spoke badly about the prince. He never insulted Nneka. He simply observed. Sometimes Adamma noticed him watching thoughtfully whenever the prince passed through the village. Yet he rarely commented. His focus remained on his farm, his work, and his friendship with Adamma. Life continued moving forward. The seasons changed gradually. Crops grew in the fields. Harvests approached. Festivals came and went. Yet throughout it all, Nneka's devotion never weakened. If anything, it became stronger. She poured more time, energy, and affection into the relationship. She believed every sacrifice would soon be rewarded. She believed every effort was bringing her closer to becoming a princess. She believed every promise the prince made. What she could not see was that her obsession with status had clouded her judgment. The dreams she chased so desperately were preventing her from recognizing danger. While she imagined crowns, jewels, and royal celebrations, a very different future was slowly taking shape beyond her sight. And, unknown to Nneka, every step she took towards those glittering dreams was carrying her closer and closer towards the heartbreak waiting ahead. Everything began to collapse on a market day that looked ordinary at first. The morning sun rose over Achala, as it always did. Women prepared food, farmers headed to their fields, traders arranged their goods in the market square. Children ran around playing games while goats wandered between stalls, searching for anything they could steal. The market was especially busy that day because traders had arrived from several neighboring villages. The air was filled with noise. Women called out prices, buyers bargained loudly. Drummers entertained crowds near the center of the market. The smell of roasted meat, fried plantains, smoked fish, and spices drifted through the air. Nneka arrived early that morning, feeling happier than she had in months. She had spent part of the previous evening with the supposed prince, and he had once again filled her mind with beautiful promises. He had spoken about future plans, luxury, and life inside the palace. Those promises still echoed in her thoughts. As she walked through the market, she imagined herself wearing expensive jewelry while servants followed behind her. She imagined returning to Achala one day as a royal woman. She imagined villagers bowing respectfully when they saw her. The fantasy felt so real that she almost smiled at nothing. Nearby, several women watched her walk past. One whispered to another, "There goes the future queen." The second woman sighed, or so she believes. They exchanged knowing looks. Meanwhile, the supposed prince sat comfortably beneath a shaded area near the market. He had become accustomed to attention. Villagers greeted him respectfully. Some still admired him. Others remained suspicious. Yet, nobody expected what was about to happen. Around midday, a group of travelers arrived from a distant village called Uzodo. They carried baskets of goods and hoped to trade before returning home. Among them was a middle-aged man named Eze. He was known as a loud and straightforward man who never hesitated to speak his mind. After arranging his goods, Eze began walking through the market, greeting familiar faces and observing the busy surroundings. Then, his eyes landed on the supposed prince. He froze instantly. His expression changed so suddenly that nearby traders noticed. Eze stared hard. Then he rubbed his eyes as though he could not believe what he was seeing. The man sitting beneath the tree smiled confidently at passing villagers, completely unaware that someone had recognized him. Eze continued staring. Finally, he burst out laughing. It was not a small laugh. It was the kind of loud laugh that made people turn around immediately. The market noise seemed to pause for a moment. Several traders looked at him curiously. "What is funny?" one woman asked. Eze pointed toward the supposed prince. "That man." "The prince?" she asked. Eze laughed even harder. Tears nearly formed in his eyes. "Prince?" he repeated. "Who called him a prince?" The woman looked confused. "He called himself a prince." Eze slapped his own knee. "That man is no prince." Nearby villagers immediately became interested. Within minutes, people started gathering around them. The supposed prince noticed the attention and looked uncomfortable. "What do you mean?" someone asked. Eze pointed directly at him. "I know that man." Silence spread through the crowd. The prince's confident smile disappeared slightly. Eze continued. "His name is not Prince Kelechi." Murmurs rippled through the gathering crowd. The supposed prince stood up quickly. "You are mistaken." Eze laughed again. "Mistaken?" He stepped closer. "I have seen you before. I know exactly who you are." The prince folded his arms. "I think you are confusing me with someone else." Eze shook his head. "No, I am not." By now, dozens of villagers had gathered around them. Traders abandoned their stalls. Curious children pushed through the crowd. Even people from distant corners of the market came rushing over to see what was happening. Nneka arrived moments later. She immediately sensed tension. "What is going on?" she asked. Nobody answered. Everyone was focused on Eze and the supposed prince. Eze raised his voice. "This man is a fraud." Gasps spread through the crowd. Nneka's heart skipped a beat. "What?" someone shouted. Eze pointed again. "He has done this before." The prince tried to interrupt. "That is a lie." Eze ignored him. "He travels from village to village, pretending to be wealthy. He tells women he is a prince. He promises marriage. He collects gifts. Then he disappears." The crowd erupted into shocked whispers. Nneka felt her stomach tighten painfully. The prince immediately became defensive. "He is lying," Eze laughed. "Then explain why I saw you in another village 2 years ago doing exactly the same thing." The prince's face darkened. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Really?" Eze replied. "Should I mention the names of the women?" The crowd grew quieter. The prince remained silent. Eze continued. "You convinced young women that you were royalty. You promised them marriage. Some became pregnant. Then you disappeared." The words hit Achala like a thunderstorm. Nneka felt dizzy. Her breathing became shallow. "No," she whispered. "No." Yet the situation became worse. Another traveler stepped forward. "I know him too." The crowd turned. "You know him?" someone asked. The man nodded. "Yes." He pointed toward the supposed prince. "Everything Eze is saying is true." More whispers spread through the market. The prince looked increasingly nervous. Another person stepped forward, then another. One after another, people began sharing stories. Different villages, different women, different lies. Yet the pattern remained the same. Wealth, promises, marriage, deception, disappearance. Every new story struck the crowd like another blow. Nneka felt as though the ground beneath her feet was crumbling. The prince continued denying everything. "They are lying." "All of them?" someone asked. "Yes." "Why would so many people tell the same lie?" The prince had no answer. Sweat appeared on his forehead. His confident posture began to fade. Villagers who once admired him now stared with suspicion. Some looked angry, others looked disappointed. Many felt embarrassed for having believed him. An elderly man shook his head sadly. "So all this time we welcomed a fraud into our village." Another replied, "And we treated him like royalty." The prince's image was collapsing before everyone's eyes. The respect he had enjoyed vanished almost instantly. Nneka stood frozen among the crowd. Her mind raced. She wanted to believe he was innocent. She desperately wanted the accusations to be false. Yet deep inside, pieces of a painful puzzle were finally coming together. The delays, the excuses, the lack of wedding plans, the unanswered questions. Suddenly, everything looked different. Adamma arrived shortly afterward and immediately understood something terrible was happening. When she saw Nneka's face, her heart sank. Obi and Mas soon arrived as well. Neither spoke. The truth was already becoming obvious. By evening, the entire village knew the story. News spread faster than fire through dry grass. Everywhere, people discussed the scandal. Some were shocked, others were angry, many felt foolish. The supposed prince locked himself inside his residence for most of the evening. Outside, villagers gathered in small groups discussing what they had learned. Nneka remained silent throughout the day. She barely spoke. She barely moved. Her dreams were unraveling so quickly that her mind struggled to keep up. That night, while darkness covered Achala, the fraudster made his decision. He knew his lies had been exposed. He knew the villagers no longer trusted him. He knew more questions would appear, more witnesses might appear. So he did what he had done before. He ran. Under the cover of darkness, he gathered his belongings and quietly slipped away from Achala. By sunrise, he was gone. Completely gone. When villagers discovered his disappearance the next morning, any remaining doubt vanished. The fraud had been exposed. The prince never existed. Nneka received the news like a final blow. She sat motionless for a long time. Then reality delivered an even more painful shock. For several weeks, she had been feeling unwell. At first, she ignored it. Then she began noticing changes. Eventually, she could no longer deny the truth. She was pregnant. The realization shattered what remained of her world. The man she had trusted, the man she had defended, the man she had imagined marrying had abandoned her completely. There would be no palace, no royal wedding, no crown, no luxurious future, only heartbreak. Nneka cried for hours, then days. She locked herself inside her room and refused to see visitors. Meals often remained untouched. She avoided the market, she avoided gatherings, she avoided friends. Whenever she heard voices outside, she worried people were discussing her. Sometimes they were, sometimes they were not. The shame felt unbearable. Amma cried privately for her daughter. Obi remained deeply disappointed but also deeply hurt. Adamma felt sorrow despite everything that had happened. She remembered every warning she had given, every conversation, every concern, yet seeing her sister suffer brought no satisfaction, only sadness. Several villagers sympathized with Nneka. They understood she had been deceived. Yet even those who felt sorry for her could not ignore the painful truth. Warning after warning had been given. Concern after concern had been expressed. Advice after advice had been rejected. Pride and ambition had drowned out every voice trying to help. Now the consequences stood before her, impossible to escape. Day after day, Nneka remained inside the house, weeping for the future she had lost, while the village slowly adjusted to the shocking truth that the prince they once admired had never been a prince at all. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest weeks Nneka had ever experienced in her entire life. The loud confidence that had once filled her voice disappeared. The proud walk that had once made her seem taller than everyone else was gone. The endless talk about palaces, crowns, servants, and royal weddings vanished completely. The same girl who had once boasted that she was destined for greatness now spent most of her days sitting quietly inside her family's house, staring at nothing, speaking very little, and carrying a sadness so heavy that everyone around her could feel it. Achala continued with his daily life as villages always do. Farmers still went to their farms every morning. Women still fetched water from the stream. Traders still sold goods in the market. Children still played in dusty roads. Yet, whenever Nneka's name came up in conversation, people lowered their voices. Some spoke with sympathy. Others spoke with disappointment. A few spoke with judgment. Everywhere she went, she felt eyes following her. Even when nobody was actually looking, she imagined they were. The shame weighed heavily on her heart. One morning, she finally gathered enough courage to leave the house and walk to the stream. She wrapped her scarf carefully around her head and kept her eyes fixed on the ground. As she approached the stream, she noticed several women standing nearby. Instantly, fear gripped her heart. What if they laughed? What if they mocked her? What if they reminded her of all the things she had said before? She almost turned around and went home. Then she heard one woman speak softly. "Good morning, Nneka." The voice carried no mockery, only kindness. Nneka looked up slowly. The woman smiled gently. "How are you feeling?" Nneka struggled to answer. "I am fine." The words came out weakly. The woman nodded. Take care of yourself. That was all. No insults, no laughter, no cruel comments. Yet Nneka still hurried home afterward. She was not ready to face people. At home, her mother watched her carefully. Ma's heart hurt every time she saw her daughter looking so broken. She had warned her many times. She had tried to protect her. Yet, despite her disappointment, she could not stop loving her child. One evening, while preparing dinner, she found Nneka sitting alone outside beneath a tree. The sun was setting. Orange light stretched across the village. Ma sat beside her quietly. For several moments, neither spoke. Then, Nneka suddenly burst into tears. "Mother, I ruined everything." Ma wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "No, I did." Tears streamed down Nneka's face. "Everyone warned me. Everyone." Her voice broke. "You warned me. Father warned me. Adamma warned me. I did not listen." Ma's eyes filled with tears too. "What is done is done. I was foolish." "Yes." Nneka looked surprised by the honesty. Ma sighed. "You made mistakes. Big mistakes. But mistakes do not mean your life is over." Nneka lowered her head. "It feels over." "It is not." Ma gently touched her face. "You are still my daughter." Those simple words made Nneka cry even harder. Throughout her pregnancy, Adamma remained by her side. This surprised many people, including Nneka herself. After everything that had happened over the years, after every insult, every cruel remark, every moment of mockery, Adamma still chose kindness. Whenever Nneka felt sick, Adamma helped her. Whenever chores became difficult, Adamma quietly handled them. Whenever sadness overwhelmed her, Adamma sat beside her and listened. One afternoon, while Adamma washed clothes near the compound, Nneka watched her from a distance. Guilt twisted painfully inside her chest. For years, she had treated Adamma terribly. Yet here Adamma was, helping her without complaint. Finally, Nneka spoke. "Why are you doing this?" Adamma looked up. "Doing what?" "Helping me." Nneka stared at her. "After everything I said to you?" Adamma smiled softly. "You are still my sister." Those words hit Nneka harder than any insult ever could. She looked away quickly because tears were forming again. Later that evening, she sat alone thinking about all the times she had mocked Adamma. She remembered laughing at her friendship with Nzube. She remembered calling them poor. She remembered acting superior. Every memory now felt embarrassing. Meanwhile, Nzube continued supporting the family in quiet ways. He never drew attention to his actions. He simply helped when help was needed. When Obi struggled with farm work because of stress and worry, Nzube assisted him. When sections of their roof needed repairs after heavy rain, Nzube repaired them. When fencing around the farm became damaged, Nzube fixed it. He never expected praise. He never mentioned his efforts. He simply showed up and worked. One afternoon, Obi stood beside him while they repaired part of the compound fence. After several minutes of silence, Obi spoke. "Thank you." Nzube looked confused. "For what?" "For everything." Nzube smiled slightly. "You do not need to thank me. I do." Obi's voice became emotional. "Many people disappeared when trouble came. You stayed." Nzube continued working quietly. After a moment, he said, "Good people do not abandon family during difficult times." Obi looked at him carefully. Those words stayed with him long after the conversation ended. Nneka noticed Nzube's behavior too. The realization made her uncomfortable. For years, she had judged him based entirely on appearance. She remembered how she had laughed at his clothes, his hands, his work, and his simple life. Yet now, she found herself comparing him to the man she had trusted. The comparison was painful. The fake prince had arrived looking wealthy and impressive. Nzube had arrived carrying a farming hoe. Her fake prince had made endless promises. Nzube rarely spoke about himself at all. The fake prince had taken everything he could. Nzube constantly gave whatever help he could offer. The fake prince had disappeared when trouble came. Nzube remained present every single day. One evening, Nneka sat outside watching Nzube help her father carry supplies from the farm. The sight stirred something inside her. For the first time, she truly saw him, not as the poor farmer she had mocked, not as someone beneath her, but as a good man. A genuinely good man. The realization filled her with regret. She remembered the day she had humiliated him near the stream. She remembered every cruel word. Her stomach tightened painfully. What have I done? She whispered to herself. As the months passed and her pregnancy progressed, Nneka spent more and more time reflecting on her life. She no longer dreamed about palaces. She no longer imagined crowns. She no longer thought about servants or luxury. Instead, she thought about character. She thought about honesty. She thought about kindness. She thought about choices. One night, she sat awake while everyone else slept. Moonlight entered through the window. Her hand rested gently on her growing stomach. For the first time, she truly thought deeply about the child she was carrying. The realization changed something inside her. This child would depend on her. This child would learn from her. This child would watch her actions. Suddenly, becoming a better person felt more important than becoming a wealthy person. She did not want her child growing up with the same pride that had led her into disaster. She did not want her child judging others based on appearances. She wanted something different. Something better. The next morning, she surprised everyone by helping with household chores without being asked. At first, Ma thought it was temporary. Then it happened again the next day, and the day after that. Slowly, small changes began appearing in Nneka's behavior. She became more patient. She became more humble. She listened more. She complained less. The transformation was not immediate. She still struggled with regret and sadness. Some days were harder than others. Some mornings she woke up crying. Some nights she felt overwhelmed by fear about the future. Yet, despite those struggles, growth was happening. One afternoon, Nneka sat beneath a tree with Adamma. The breeze moved gently through the leaves overhead. For several minutes, they sat in silence. Finally, Nneka spoke. Adamma, yes? Nneka hesitated. Do you think people can change? Adamma smiled softly. Yes. Even after making terrible mistakes? Especially then. Nneka stared at the ground. I have been a terrible sister. Adamma remained quiet. I have insulted you, mocked you, hurt you. Her voice shook slightly. I am sorry. Adamma looked at her carefully. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, Adamma reached over and gently squeezed her hand. I know. Tears filled Nneka's eyes again. Yet this time, the tears felt different. They were not only tears of pain, they were tears of healing. Little by little, she was beginning to understand lessons that pride had hidden from her for years. She was beginning to understand that a person's worth came from character, not appearance. She was beginning to understand that kindness mattered more than status. She was beginning to understand that honesty mattered more than wealth. And as her child continued growing within her, Nneka slowly became less concerned with luxury, titles, and royal dreams, and more concerned with becoming the kind of person she wished she had been all along. The months that followed brought peace back into the household little by little. The wounds left behind by the fake prince had not completely healed, but life slowly continued. Nneka's pregnancy advanced, and although she still carried regret in her heart, she was no longer the proud and selfish young woman she had once been. She had become quieter, more thoughtful, and more humble. Adamma remained patient and kind, helping her sister whenever she could. Obi and Ma continued supporting both daughters while working hard to provide for the family. Through it all, Nzube remained a constant presence. Whenever help was needed, he was there. Whenever work became difficult, he offered assistance. Whenever someone felt discouraged, he found a way to encourage them. His kindness never seemed forced. It flowed naturally from him, and the family appreciated him more with every passing day. One afternoon, after helping Obi repair part of the farm fence, Nzube sat beneath a tree with him while sharing roasted corn. The sun hung low in the sky, and a gentle breeze moved through the leaves overhead. Obi looked at the young man thoughtfully. Over the months, he had come to admire him deeply. Nzube was hard-working, respectful, honest, and dependable. In many ways, he had become like a son to him. After several moments of silence, Nzube cleared his throat. Sir, he said quietly. Obi looked up. Yes? Nzube hesitated. For the first time in a long while, he appeared nervous. "There is something important I would like to discuss with you." Obi immediately paid attention. "Go ahead." Nzube took a deep breath. "I would like your permission to marry Adamma." The words hung in the air. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then a slow smile spread across Obi's face. He had suspected this day would eventually come. The bond between Nzube and Adamma had grown stronger over the years. They respected each other. They trusted each other. They genuinely cared about each other. Nothing about the request surprised him. What surprised him was how happy it made him feel. Obi placed a hand on Nzube's shoulder. "You do not know how long I have been hoping to hear those words." Relief immediately flooded Nzube's face. Obi laughed softly. "Did you think I would refuse?" Nzube smiled. "I did not know." "My son, if I had to choose a husband for Adamma myself, I would choose someone exactly like you." Nzube lowered his head respectfully. "Thank you." That evening, Obi shared the news with Mma. Her face immediately lit up with joy. "Finally," she said. "I thought those two would remain friends forever." Obi laughed. "Apparently not." When Adamma learned about Nzube's request, her cheeks turned red. She tried to hide her smile, but failed completely. Nneka watched the reaction quietly from across the room. For a brief moment, sadness touched her heart. Not because she was unhappy for Adamma. Quite the opposite. She was genuinely happy for her sister. Still, she pushed those thoughts aside and smiled. "Congratulations," she said sincerely. Adamma looked surprised by the warmth in her voice. Then she hugged her sister tightly. A few days later, preparations began for the traditional family gathering where Nzube would formally ask for Adamma's hand in marriage before family elders and witnesses. The atmosphere inside the household was joyful. Ma prepared food. Neighbors visited. Friends offered congratulations. The excitement spread throughout Achala quickly. Many villagers already assumed the marriage would happen. After all, everyone could see how much the two cared for each other. On the day of the gathering, relatives and respected elders assembled inside Obi's compound. Mats were spread across the ground, food was prepared, palm wine was served. The atmosphere felt warm and welcoming. Nzube arrived looking calm, though inside he carried emotions nobody else could imagine. For years, he had hidden an enormous secret. He had protected it carefully, yet he knew the time had finally come to reveal the truth. The discussions began traditionally. Elders spoke, families exchanged greetings, blessings were offered. Eventually, the conversation turned toward marriage. Everyone expected a normal gathering. Nobody realized their lives were about to change forever. After the formal discussions ended, Nzube stood slowly. The compound became quiet. He looked around at the faces gathered before him. Obi, Mma, Adamma, Nneka, elders, neighbors, friends. People he had come to care about deeply. He took a slow breath. "Before we continue," he said, "there is something everyone here deserves to know." The room became even quieter. Adamma looked confused. Obi frowned slightly. Nzube rarely sounded so serious. Nzube clasped his hands together. "Everything I have shown you about my character is real. My friendship, my work, my respect, my gratitude, those things are genuine." He paused briefly. "But there is one part of my life I have hidden." Curious murmurs spread through the gathering. Nzube continued. "The truth is that I am not simply a farmer." Complete silence followed. Adamma stared at him. Obi stared at him. Mma stared at him. Even Nneka looked confused. Nzube's voice remained calm. "I am Prince Nzube Chidebere of Uzodu Kingdom." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. For several seconds, it felt as though time itself had stopped. Then one elderly man laughed nervously. "Prince?" he asked. "Yes." The elder blinked. "A real prince?" "Yes." Silence returned. The statement seemed impossible. Adamma's heart pounded inside her chest. She searched Nzube's face, wondering if this was some kind of joke. But there was no humor in his expression, only honesty. Obi slowly sat forward. "What are you saying?" Nzube met his gaze. "I am the crown prince of Uzodu Kingdom." The shock that followed was impossible to describe. Mma's hand flew to her mouth. Several elders exchanged stunned looks. Adamma felt as though her thoughts had completely stopped working. Meanwhile, Nneka sat frozen. The words echoed inside her mind. Crown Prince Uzodu Kingdom. Crown Prince Uzodu Kingdom. Over and over again. Nzube continued. Years ago, I decided to leave my kingdom and travel in disguise. Nobody interrupted. They were too stunned. I had watched many women show interest in me because of my title. They admired wealth, they admired status, they admired power. But I wanted something different. His eyes shifted toward Adamma. I wanted someone who would value my character rather than my position. Adamma felt tears forming in her eyes. Nzube continued. So, I left the palace. I dressed as an ordinary man. I worked as a farmer. I traveled from village to village observing people. I wanted to know how people behaved when they thought I had nothing. The entire gathering listened in complete silence. Every word felt unbelievable. Yet everything suddenly made sense. His manners, his education, his confidence, his wisdom, the way he carried himself. All the small details that never quite fit together. Suddenly, they formed a complete picture. Then, Nzube looked directly at Adamma. And in Achala, I found someone who treated me with kindness before knowing anything about titles or wealth. Tears rolled down Adamma's cheeks. She could no longer hold them back. Nearby, Ma wiped tears from her own eyes. Obi looked completely overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Nneka felt as though the ground beneath her had vanished. The realization struck her with enormous force. The man she had mocked, the man she had insulted, the man she had dismissed because of his appearance, the man she had laughed at for being poor, the man she had told to stay away from her. He was the prince she had spent years dreaming about. He was everything she thought she wanted, yet she had rejected him because he arrived dressed as a farmer. A painful memory flashed through her mind. She remembered standing near the stream, laughing at him. She remembered mocking his rough hands. She remembered telling him to return as a prince if he wanted her attention. Her stomach twisted painfully. Tears filled her eyes. She wanted to disappear. The irony felt unbearable. All those years chasing royalty, all those dreams about marrying a prince, and the real prince had been standing right in front of her from the very beginning. After the gathering ended, news spread through Achala like wildfire. By sunset, the entire village knew. By the next morning, neighboring villages knew too. Everywhere people discussed the revelation. Some laughed because the situation seemed almost unbelievable. Others shook their heads in amazement. Many praised Adamma for recognizing goodness where others saw only poverty. One elderly woman told anyone willing to listen, "That girl looked at his heart. Everyone else looked at his clothes." Another villager laughed. Nneka spent years searching for a prince while insulting one every week. The story became famous throughout the area. Meanwhile, Adamma was still struggling to process everything. Several days later, Nzube invited her to visit Uzodu Kingdom. At first she felt nervous. Part of her still could not fully believe the truth. Yet, eventually she agreed. The journey took several days. Along the way, Adamma watched the landscape change. Villages appeared and disappeared. Rivers flowed past. Forests stretched toward the horizon. Finally, they reached Uzodu. The moment the kingdom came into view, Adamma stopped. Her eyes widened. Before her stood magnificent palace walls stretching high into the distance. Beautiful buildings rose above the surrounding landscape. Guards stood at the gates. Elegant gardens surrounded the royal grounds. Everything looked exactly like the kind of place described in stories. Adamma stared in disbelief. Nzube smiled softly. "Welcome to Uzodu." They passed through the gates and entered the royal grounds. Everywhere Adamma looked, she saw beauty. Decorative fountains, flowered gardens, royal courtyards, elegant buildings. Yet, despite all the luxury surrounding them, what touched her most was not the palace itself. It was the people waiting for her. Standing near the entrance were the king and queen of Uzodu, smiling warmly as they watched her approach. Their eyes were filled not with judgment or pride, but with genuine affection. As Adamma stood there, overwhelmed by everything she had seen, realized that beyond the magnificent palace, beyond the royal title, beyond the wealth and luxury, she had found something even more valuable, a loving family ready to welcome her with open arms. As Adamma stood inside the magnificent palace of Uzodu Kingdom, she still struggled to believe everything she was seeing. The palace was more beautiful than anything she had ever imagined. Tall buildings stretched toward the sky. Beautiful gardens filled with colorful flowers surrounded the royal grounds. Decorative fountains sparkled beneath the sunlight. Servants moved quietly through the courtyards. Guards stood proudly at the gates. Everything looked like something from a dream. Yet, despite all the beauty surrounding her, what touched Adamma most was the warmth she received from the royal family. The king stepped forward with a smile and opened his arms. "Welcome home, my daughter," he said. The queen immediately embraced her. "We have heard so much about you." Adamma felt tears filling her eyes. She had expected formality. She had expected strict rules and royal distance. Instead, she found kindness, genuine kindness. The royal princess, a cheerful young woman with a bright smile, rushed forward excitedly. "So this is Adamma," she said. Before Adamma could respond, the princess hugged her tightly. "I already like you." Everyone laughed. Even Adamma found herself laughing through her tears. From that very first day, the princess refused to leave her side. She showed her every part of the palace. She introduced her to servants, guards, and royal officials. She shared stories about growing up in the kingdom. She treated Adamma less like a future sister-in-law and more like a lifelong friend. One evening, while sitting together in a beautiful garden filled with flowers, the princess smiled warmly. "Do you know why everyone loves you already?" Adamma shook her head. "No, because my brother never talks about people." Adamma laughed softly. "Really? Never. But whenever he mentioned you, his face changed." Adamma lowered her eyes shyly. The princess grinned. "That is how we knew you were special." Over the following weeks, Adamma settled into palace life. The king admired her humility. The queen admired her kindness. The princess adored her. Even palace servants quickly grew fond of her because she treated everyone with respect. Unlike many people who would have become proud after entering a palace, Adamma remained exactly the same. She greeted workers politely. She thanked servants for their help. She listened carefully when people spoke. One afternoon, the queen watched Adamma helping an elderly palace worker carry baskets of fruit. The queen smiled. "Now I understand why Nzube chose her." The king nodded. Character cannot be hidden. Meanwhile, preparations for the royal wedding began. The announcement spread throughout Uzodu Kingdom and beyond. Messengers traveled to neighboring villages and kingdoms carrying invitations. Chiefs, nobles, elders, and important guests prepared to attend. The excitement grew larger every day. Even Achala became caught up in the excitement. When news reached the village, people could hardly believe it. "Our Adamma is marrying a prince," one woman said proudly. "Not just a prince," another corrected, "the crown prince." Everywhere people talked about the upcoming wedding. Children pretended to be princes and princesses while playing. Women discussed wedding preparations. Men debated how many visitors would attend. The entire village felt connected to the celebration. Obi and Ma received invitations personally delivered by royal messengers. When they opened the invitation, Ma immediately began crying. "What is wrong?" Obi asked. Ma wiped her tears. "Nothing is wrong," she smiled. "I am just happy." Back in the palace, preparations continued. Tailors worked day and night creating beautiful outfits. Cooks planned enormous feasts. Musicians rehearsed performances. Decorators transformed courtyards and gathering spaces into breathtaking displays of beauty. Every corner of the kingdom seemed alive with activity. The royal wedding soon became the most anticipated event anyone could remember. Finally, the great day arrived. Before sunrise, Uzodu Kingdom was already awake. Drums echoed through the air, musicians played joyful melodies, visitors poured into the kingdom from every direction. Chiefs arrived wearing magnificent robes. Nobles arrived with their families. Villagers traveled long distances simply to witness the historic occasion. The roads leading into Zodu became crowded with excited guests. This celebration felt enormous. Adamma woke early that morning. As servants helped prepare her for the ceremony, emotions overwhelmed her. She thought about Achala. She thought about her parents. She thought about the years she had spent helping others, never imagining that life would lead her here. Most of all, she thought about Nzube, the man she had befriended when everyone else saw only a poor farmer, the man whose character had remained unchanged, whether dressed as a farmer or a prince. Tears filled her eyes. The queen gently held her hands. "Why are you crying?" Adamma smiled. "Because I am happy." The queen kissed her forehead. "Then those are good tears." Outside, the wedding celebration had already begun. The sounds of drums filled the kingdom. Dancers moved through the streets. Visitors laughed and celebrated. Everywhere people smiled. When Adamma finally emerged, dressed beautifully for the ceremony, a collective gasp spread through the crowd. She looked radiant. Nzube stood waiting for her, unable to stop smiling. For a moment, everything else seemed to disappear. The crowds, the music, the noise, all he could see was her. The ceremony was magnificent. Elders offered blessings. Royal traditions were observed. Guests cheered. Music played continuously. By the time the marriage was officially completed, joy exploded throughout the kingdom. Drums thundered. Dancers performed. Guests celebrated loudly. The feast that followed was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Long tables stretched across enormous gathering spaces. Food seemed endless. There was pounded yam, rich soups, jollof rice, roasted meats, pepper soup, grilled fish, fried plantains, fruits, vegetables, palm wine, and countless other delicacies. Guests ate until they could barely move. One elderly man joked that if he ate another bite, he would need 4 people to carry him home. The joke spread quickly, causing waves of laughter. The celebration continued not for hours, but for days. Music echoed through the kingdom from morning until night. Dancers performed tirelessly. Storytellers entertained crowds. Visitors celebrated everywhere. The wedding became a memory people would discuss for generations. Eventually, Adamma officially became a princess. Later, after the passing of time and further royal ceremonies, she became a beloved queen beside Nzube. Yet, despite her new position, she remained the same kind-hearted woman she had always been. She visited villages, she helped those in need, she treated people with dignity. The people of Zodu loved her because she genuinely cared about them. Meanwhile, back in Achala, life continued for Nneka. Not long after the wedding, she gave birth to a healthy baby. The moment she held her child for the first time, something changed inside her forever. The tiny life resting in her arms immediately became more important than her pride, her regrets, or her old dreams. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she looked at the child. "I promise," she whispered softly, "I will do better." Motherhood transformed her. Raising a child was not easy. There were sleepless nights, there were difficult days, there were moments of exhaustion. Yet Nneka embraced the responsibility completely. She worked hard. She cared for her child with devotion. She became determined to create a better future. The lessons she had learned through pain stayed with her. She no longer cared about impressing people. She no longer dreamed about luxury. She cared about honesty, responsibility, and kindness. One afternoon, after much reflection, Nneka made an important decision. She began apologizing to people she had hurt. The first apology was to her parents. Sitting with them beneath a tree, she lowered her head. "I am sorry." Obi and Ma listened quietly. Tears filled Nneka's eyes. "You tried to guide me. You tried to protect me. I ignored you." Her voice trembled. "I caused pain for this family." Ma reached over and held her hand. Obi sighed deeply. "You made mistakes." Nneka nodded. "I know." Obi looked at her carefully. "But you have changed." Tears rolled down Nneka's face. "Can you forgive me?" Obi smiled sadly. "You are our daughter. There was never anything to forgive." The next apology was to Adamma. When the sisters met again, Nneka struggled to speak. So many years of regret sat heavily in her heart. Finally, she gathered courage. "I treated you terribly." Adamma listened quietly. "I mocked you. I insulted you. I laughed at you." Nneka lowered her head. "I was wrong." Adamma stepped forward and embraced her immediately. Nneka burst into tears. The sisters held each other tightly. Years of pain seemed to melt away in that moment. Later, Nneka apologized to Nzube as well. This was perhaps the hardest apology of all. Standing before him, she remembered every cruel word she had spoken. "I judged you because of your appearance," she admitted. "I never bothered to see who you really were." Nzube smiled gently. "The past is gone." Nneka shook her head. "Still, I am sorry." Nzube nodded. "I forgive you." The kindness in his voice made her emotional. Over time, Nneka apologized to many villagers she had once looked down upon. Some laughed and accepted immediately, others were surprised. Yet most people recognized the sincerity in her actions. Slowly, she rebuilt relationships and earned respect through humility. Years passed. Adamma and Nzube ruled wisely together. Their marriage remained strong because it had been built on friendship, trust, and genuine love, rather than wealth or status. The people of Uzodu admired them greatly. In Achala, Nneka continued raising her child and living an honest life. She never forgot the lesson she had learned. Sometimes she looked back and wondered how different her life might have been if she had valued character from the beginning. Yet she no longer lived in regret. Instead, she used those lessons to become a better person. The villagers often shared the story of the two sisters with younger generations. They spoke about the proud girl who chased appearances and the kind girl who valued character. They spoke about the prince who disguised himself as a farmer. They spoke about the choices that changed lives forever. And whenever the story ended, the lesson remained the same. Riches can deceive, titles can deceive, appearances can deceive, but kindness, honesty, humility, and good character never lose their value. In the end, Adamma found happiness because she loved a man for who he truly was, while Nneka found wisdom because life taught her lessons she would never forget. And so, with love, forgiveness, growth, and understanding, the story of the two sisters of Achala finally came to a beautiful end. The moral lesson of the story is that people should never judge others by their appearance, wealth, or social status. True character is shown through kindness, honesty, humility, and good actions. Nneka chased riches and appearances and suffered heartbreak, while Adamma valued goodness and was rewarded with love and happiness. The story teaches that pride can lead to mistakes, but humility, wisdom, and a good heart will always bring lasting blessings. Thanks for watching this amazing story on African Stories by V. If you liked it and felt inspired, please show your support by clicking the like button, sharing with your friends, and leaving a comment below. To see more interesting stories and learn about different cultures, subscribe to African Stories by V. And don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means a lot and helps us bring more stories to you. Until we meet again, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep smiling.